So there's probably no bigger wrench that you can throw in a bass fisherman's tournament day or just fun day on the water than muddy water. We've all been in that situation where you get out there, you're on a fire bite, and all of a sudden it starts pouring down rain and that water comes up and you can feel yourself just cringe a little bit because you get to the river or the lake and it is just dirt. And you know, there's a lot of guys that are really excited about that, myself included, but it can change things up a little bit. And what I want to talk about today is what I wish somebody would have told me about fishing muddy water, because I feel like there's a lot of anglers out there that hate it, and there's a lot of anglers out there that love it, and the guys that hate it just don't understand what it does, and there's a lot of misconceptions that I want to break down today. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about the baits, I'm going to talk about how fish position, and most importantly, what I wish somebody would have told me about fishing muddy water. So let's get into it right now. So the first thing that I want to talk about is how fish position in muddy water, because what you first have to figure out before you determine if it's muddy is what is muddy water on your lake. A lot of times we get to new bodies of water and you get there and you're like, man, the lake is dirt, but it's been that color for a month. So to those fish, it's clean. It might be dirty to you, but to the fish, it's clean. So that's one thing you have to think about before you even decide what baits you're going to throw, is getting an understanding of what the water clarity is supposed to look like. And if it's supposed to be kind of dirty, that's actually going to act as in clear water for those fish, and that's going to change entirely what I throw. So a lot of times you can tell if it's fresh mud or if the lake has been that color for a while. I usually dip my bait in the water and see how many inches of visibility I have. But you can also just go back and look at the lake levels on the GIS websites for whatever lake. Just Google it and you can see whether it's come up or down. And if it's been stable, then you know that watercolor has just been that. And so that's something you need to know before you start throwing big crazy baits and, you know, doing what we're about to talk about. So let's say you've established that that muddy water has just gotten there. Well, it's kind of like what happens if I were to turn off all the lights in this room. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to feel my way around, and the fish have to do exactly that. And so what it really does is people think that it makes fish all go to the bank, and that is not true at all. There is a big population of fish that go to the bank, but it's exactly what I just talked about. It's like shutting the lights off in a room. People have to feel their way around, and the fish have to do the exact same thing. But if you're in the middle of the room and somebody shuts the light off, and all of a sudden you find a desk or something out there, you're going to be sitting right on that desk, or, you know, you're going to use that desk as a reference point, and you're going to not leave it for the most part. And that's exactly what fish do offshore as well. Some awesome days I've had offshore fishing have been dirty water. You know, whether it's rock piles, stumps, logs, laydowns, etc., those fish get right on that stuff. They don't wander around it. It's not like clean water where they could be 10 feet over here or 10 feet over here. If they find something, they're going to be on it and they're going to be in it. And so that can really be used to your advantage, because you know those fish are right there. And so, but it's the same thing out offshore as it is on the bank. You have to think about it like those fish need to feel their way around. And so when you're trying to make your casts and you're trying to pick apart things, you have to know that you have to be hitting it. You have to be getting your bait in the juice the whole time. Which kind of leads me to my next point, is repetitive casts. That's something I so wish somebody would have told me, because a lot of times what you have happen is if you're fishing a log and you make a cast and the log is like this and you go over the log, but the fish is actually over here, it can't see. It can feel, but it can't see. And so you have to make repetitive casts at pieces of cover, whether that's a stump offshore, whether that's a laydown, whether it's just going down a riprap bank. Making repetitive casts at certain things, especially when you find those irregularities, that is absolutely critical, because that's how you're going to go from catching one fish to 3, 4, 5, dozens of fish. We've all watched it on live. Guys like Greg Hackney are so good at it because they will make 10 casts at one piece of cover. And I'm not saying to do that to every piece of cover, but what I would do is I would make it a point when you first get to the lake to pull up and you find some offshore stuff or you find some isolated pieces of cover. Make a handful of casts at it before you go over it, just to see what would happen. I can't tell you how many times that I've hit something, gone over it, hit something. You make that cast where you're trying to feel it, just playing with a bait, and all of a sudden the 7th cast I get, I catch that fish. So making sure that you are fully covering what those fish are sitting on is super important when it comes to dirty water. That is going to change your game as far as when that water gets dirty. Real quick guys, those of you guys that are new to the channel, don't be afraid to hit the subscribe button to follow along with the regular content that I have coming out, but let's keep talking about muddy water. So another thing that I want to talk about with muddy water is a lot of times what goes hand in hand with that is water rises. So when you get that water that rises, and if you have warmer water especially, you know, if you get muddy water in the springtime and the summertime, even in the fall, those fish are going to follow that water and they're going to go as far back as it can go. I have caught so many bass in dirty water that are literally just in inches of water, you know. If they can get into it, they're going to be there. If you guys ever watched the Bassmaster event on Mississippi River where Jason Porosnik won, he was catching them on a frog in places that were supposed to be dry land like 3 days ago. So as soon as that water starts to come up, those fish are going to enjoy that opportunity to go check out that new cover, you know, because a lot of times there's frogs, there's crayfish, there's salamanders, there's everything lives up in there, and the bait fish follow it a lot of times as well too. So making sure you're going with that water can be absolutely critical. Now if the dirty water is falling, now what you want to do is you want to back out a little bit and still find those pieces of cover, but just make sure you're getting out where those fish are going to now. Because as soon as that water starts to fall, those fish back out kind of fast. So that is a really, really big important topic. So let's talk about the baits a little bit, because this is something that I think guys really, really overlook. As soon as that water gets dirty, they're throwing things like this. They're throwing a big jig, they're throwing big chatterbaits, they're throwing chartreuse and black, they're throwing solid white, and that's not always the case. A lot of times what happens when that water gets dirty is fish go off vibration. It's sound. You know, they go off of vibration and sound. Again, if you were to shut the lights off in a room and you can't see, you're not going to rely on your sight. You're going to rely on what you hear. So if you hear footsteps coming into a room, you're going to know that it's coming. You're going to go off the feel of something. If somebody were to walk by you, you can feel that air pressure as somebody walks by you. And so that's the same thing that those fish are going to do. They're going to use their lateral line to feel the vibration of different baits. They're going to use the sound that those baits are making coming through the water, and that's really going to change how they feed. Because a lot of times you're not going to get fish that will choke it all the time. A lot of times they have it on the side of their face. And that's a huge thing, is looking at how each fish catch is recognized, I guess is how you could say. When I catch a fish, when I first get to a body of water, I am going to analyze how that fish has that bait. And this is what I mean. If I catch a fish and it's got the crankbait on the side of its face, I'm immediately going to change colors. Because what that's telling me is that fish wanted this bait, but there was something about it that it wasn't 100% sure of. Unless they have it choked every single time, I'm always going to be thinking about something that I can do different. And so muddy water is no different. If I'm using a chartreuse and black bait, and again, I'm getting one hook, I'm getting it under the chin, that's telling me that, sure, that water's dirty, but those fish might really be able to see a lot better than I think, and so I'm going to change and go to something a little bit more natural. Maybe not super natural, but I'm going to start dialing it back. And if I stop getting bit, then I know I was throwing the right color and those fish just aren't being able to see it. But it's making those changes, because a lot of times in dirty water, those fish have a lot more sense of awareness of what's around them than we give them credit for. And Kevin Van Dam does a great way to talk about this in one of his episodes on Bass U. So if you guys don't have a Bass U membership, you can go check out a link down below. I have linked where you can get on that, because Bass U is probably one of my favorite tools where I learn a ton about bass fishing from the best pros in the world. But back into what we're talking about, these fish have a great sense of awareness, and so oftentimes the biggest mistakes that I see guys doing is throwing giant spinner baits with these big blades on there, throwing, you know, giant chatterbaits, throwing these great big baits that these fish are over there going, oh my gosh, why would I eat that? You know, I've had some of my best days in dirty water cranking natural colored baits, because that dirty water has been there for a little bit, or they can just feel what's around them. They can get a better idea, especially if it's been pressured a lot. I'm going to downsize everything and I'm going to throw more natural colors. Again, if that water is just getting muddy, then yeah, you know, throw your bigger baits. If that water is like chocolate milk, like zero visibility, throw the baits you need to throw to get bit. But I'm saying if you're throwing baits like this and you're not getting bit, or you're seeing what's going on as far as the hooks being on the outside of the face, or you can feel it when a fish swats at it. I don't know if you guys have ever felt this, but you can feel a lot of times when you're reeling that bait, when one pushes it and misses it, you're like, wow, that was weird right there. Like, you can just feel the bait doesn't run right for a second. That's when you need to make those adjustments. That is key when you're fishing dirty water. So for more great tips like this, check out Bass University. I'll have that link down below along with some of the gear that I talked about. But thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and I'll see you on the next video.